All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for some headlines. Some headlines that the mainstream media would rather you not hear. So we're going to talk about them together. This is from the Pennsylvania Department of State. It's on X, and this is what they posted. Quote, Pennsylvanians won't always know the final results of all races on election night. Any changes in results that occur as counties continue to count ballots are not evidence that an election is, quote unquote, rigged. See the full explanation at vote.pa.gov/fact-check. Okay, first of all, a government is not supposed to serve as a fact check. A government is supposed to tell the truth, and journalists are supposed to serve as a fact check to hold accountable any government officials that are lying. If you as a government are fact checking something, you are acting as propaganda. Perhaps that's neither here nor there, except for the fact that this is propaganda. This is propaganda. Why would the Pennsylvania Department of State, this is the question that should be asked, why is the Pennsylvania Department of State warning us 3 months before the election that we're actually not going to know the results of the election on the night of the election? They already know this. They can see into the future. Sorry, we're going to have stuff go wrong. There's nothing we can do in 3 months ahead of time to prevent this. But don't worry, just because you can't see it and you don't know any information, if there's a wildly different result that happens from the time you go to bed until the time you wake up in the morning, nothing shady going on here. Let me tell you what they're going to do. Let me tell you why they're saying this. They are preparing this so that they have plausible deniability. We told you this would happen. This is not unusual. We warned you months ago that this would happen. And the reason that they're warning us is because they need to know on the night of the election how many votes they need to beat Donald Trump. What the actual tally of the election is, they need to know how many votes they need to find overnight so Joe Biden wins that critical swing state of Pennsylvania. That is why they are posting this. But the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about that. All right, there was a report this week that Joe Rogan, popular podcaster Joe Rogan, endorsed RFK Jr. for president. And when I saw this, I thought, oh man, that's too bad and kind of dumb. It turns out it's not true. It's fake news. Joe Rogan did not endorse RFK Jr. In fact, Joe Rogan himself denied that he endorsed RFK Jr. He said he likes the guy. He spoke very highly of the guy. He endorses some of his policies, but he did not endorse him in the sense that Joe Rogan did not say he was going to vote for RFK and that you should vote for RFK. That's what an endorsement is. And I'm glad he said this because it would be kind of stupid to endorse RFK. And I say that as someone who actually likes RFK Jr. I like his crusade against Big Pharma. I like his crusade against the deep state. But RFK Jr., the fact that he is still running for president is problematic, and here's why. This weekend, this is a little personal anecdote, this weekend I took my daughters to the farmer's market, and let me just say I was in full mom mode, like sunglasses, hair in a bun, babies crawling all over me. And there was a table, an RFK table at the farmer's market, and the guy that was behind the RFK table stops me and he goes, hello, ma'am, may I speak with you for a moment? Are you at all concerned about my children's future, or about your children's future? And I kind of laughed because I realized he didn't recognize me, and I said, yes, sir, I am concerned about my children's future, just a little bit. And he says, well, then could we talk about RFK Jr.? Do you have any interest in voting for him? And I said, I think RFK is great. I think he's great on Big Pharma. I think he's great on the deep state. I find him to be, pretty uncompromising in his principles, although I don't agree with his stance on abortion and climate change. But I don't think it's smart to vote for him because he can't win. And the guy goes, well, the only person that can make these changes is RFK. And I was like, well, sure, he knows a lot about Big Pharma, but I'm hoping he teams up with Trump and takes on Big Pharma. And the guy goes, but we need RFK in the White House. And so then I was like, okay, this guy's not listening. So I said, well, here's how I view it. And this is what I told RFK at the RNC. If you're running as a third party in a system, a two-party system, even if you don't like the two-party system, then you are effectively a spoiler. If you are a spoiler for Joe Biden, please be my guest. Please run. Please spoil for Joe Biden, or in this case, Kamala Harris. But if you are spoiling in any way for Donald Trump, then I can't support you, and it actually makes me think less of you. And I don't know at this point. There's valid arguments on both sides. Is he spoiling for Kamala Harris because there are disaffected Democrats who don't want someone as radical as Kamala or Joe Biden? Or is he spoiling for Donald Trump because there are a lot of suburban women, say, who like RFK Jr.'s stance on vaccines and don't like Trump's mean tweets? A couple of months ago, I argued that RFK was a spoiler for Joe Biden because there were so many people that think Joe Biden's too old. Now that it's Kamala Harris, I don't know. But what I do know is that RFK seems to be actively trying to recruit Republican voters to vote for him. And the reason that I say that is because every time I open my X feed, which is about 100 times a day, there are multiple ads from RFK targeting me. And I think it's pretty obvious on my X account that I am a Republican and that I am going to be voting for Trump. So RFK is trying to recruit from Trump voters, which means he's going to act as a spoiler to Trump, and I don't like that. Because if he spoils for Trump, who do we get in the White House? We get Kamala Harris in the White House. And that's bad news for everybody. So it's good news that Joe Rogan didn't endorse RFK, but I do question what RFK is doing right now if he's actively trying to spoil for Donald Trump. Speaking of Big Pharma, our next headline is best introduced with a video. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci, and I will let Dr. Anthony Fauci speak for himself. Take a look.
I got infected about 2 weeks ago. It was my third infection, and I had been vaccinated and boosted a total of 6 times.
I'm sorry you were sick, Dr. Fauci. Truly, I'm sorry. 3 times? Even I haven't had COVID 3 times, and I'm not vaccinated. 6 times? What kind of absolute nutcase gets the COVID vaccine 6 times? Oh, the kind that gets COVID 3 times because you've shot your immune system. That actually should be the public health announcement that the Trump campaign runs after they win the White House. Don't get the COVID booster or else this will happen. You'll get COVID 3 times. So our next headline, Kamala Harris copied Donald Trump on his new plan for no tax on tips. And this is particularly interesting because this was Donald Trump's effort, and a good effort, Donald Trump's effort to appeal to white working class. Waitresses, for example, they work on tips. They get paid minimum wage and work on tips. And then they're supposed to self-report the tax that they're supposed to pay on the tips. It's a terrible system. And Trump says he's going to do away with that. There's going to be no tax on tips. This is a great policy. And Kamala Harris comes out and says, actually, I'm also going to implement a policy that there's no tax on tips. She's trying to take the wind out of Trump's sails, and it is critically important that we recognize the following. This is a headline from the IRS itself, and I quote, IRS introduces new service industry tip reporting program. This is, in other words, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually hired more IRS agents in order to make sure that those waitresses paid taxes on the tips, or else the IRS was going to come after them. That's what Harris actually did, and now she's verbally claiming she wants to do away with taxes on tips. What an absolute liar. An absolute liar. It is, I will grant her, a strategic move to try to take the wind out of Trump's sails, and I don't think it will work, except that the mainstream media are such propagandists. But hey, that's why we're here.